Why I wept after my Amish wedding. The invisible truth. My hands are shaking and I don't know why yet. It's past midnight and the house is finally quiet. Samuel is asleep on his side of the bed, one arm folded under his pillow the way he always sleeps. And I'm sitting on the floor in the dress. Still in the dress. The navy blue one Mama and Aunt Fanny stitched by hand. 342 straight pins over 4 weeks. No, wait. It was 6 weeks. 6, because we started the week after the ash tree fell. The lamp is low. The wick smells like kerosene and something burnt. My prayer covering is still pinned to my hair, and one of the pins is digging into my scalp, behind my right ear, and I don't take it out. I don't know why I don't take it out. My mouth tastes like the mint tea from the reception. My knees hurt from the wooden floor. And there's this sound coming out of me that I've never heard before. Not crying exactly. More like, I don't know. Like something small trying to get out of a room with no door. I am 19 years old. I got married 11 hours ago. And nobody told me it would feel like this. Quick pause. My name is Rebecca, and this is Rebecca Amish Home. If these stories stay with you, if they make you feel less alone, subscribe. It's free, and it's the reason I can keep telling them. Tell me in the comments, what's one thing nobody prepared you for, on a day everyone said would be the happiest of your life? And if you want to go further, a super chat, or a membership, that's you telling me these voices are worth hearing. That keeps this going. Now, back to what happened. In our community, there was one rule about a woman's body, and it was never spoken out loud, which is exactly how you knew it was the most important rule of all. Your body was not yours. It belonged to God first, to your father until the wedding, and to your husband after. That's the order. That's the line. It comes from a reading of scripture our bishop leaned on hard, the part about the wife's body belonging to the husband. And nobody ever quoted the next verse, the one that says, his belongs to her too. I didn't know that verse existed until I was 26. That's the paradigm bomb nobody handed me. Half a sentence, cut clean off, and I built my whole girlhood on the half that was left. And the rule lived in the small things. In the way Mama would turn her face when I asked why Sarah Yoder didn't come to church for 6 weeks after her wedding. In the way my sister Katie, older than me by 4 years, would go quiet when I asked what a wedding night was. She'd fold a dish towel 3 times, real slow, and say, "You'll understand when it's time," and put the towel away, and the towel didn't need folding. I remember once, I was maybe 15, standing at the kitchen sink with the yellow curtains Mama sewed from a Robin Hood flour sack, and I opened my mouth to ask her something. Just something. I don't even remember what. And she looked at me, and I closed my mouth. That's how the rule was taught. Not with words. With a look that said, girls who ask that question are already ruined. And I wanted to be good. God, I wanted to be good. Samuel and I met at a Sunday singing in the spring I turned 18. He was 22. No, 23. He was 23, because he'd already been on Rumspringa for a year and come back baptized, which meant he was serious, and my father approved of serious. He drove me home in his courting buggy, and didn't say much, and I liked that about him. I liked the way he held the reins loose, like he trusted the horse to know the way. I liked that he laughed at his own jokes before he told them. I liked that he'd built the buggy himself, and there was a little dent in the dashboard where he'd dropped a hammer, and he said he'd left it there on purpose so he'd remember not to rush. We were engaged by October, and 3 weeks before the wedding, Katie came into my room while I was hemming an apron, and she sat on the edge of the bed, and she said 13 words to me. I counted them later. I counted them so many times. She said, "Just let him do what he needs to do. It'll be over quick." That was it. That was my preparation. 13 words. And then she stood up and smoothed the quilt, and walked out, and closed the door behind her. And I sat there with the needle in my hand, and I didn't move for a long time. I want you to understand. Katie loved me. Katie was doing the best she could with what she'd been given. Which was also 13 words, probably. Maybe fewer. The week of the wedding, the women came. Aunt Fanny, Mama, my grandmother Miriam, 2 of my cousins. They cooked and they cleaned and they stitched and they laughed and they told me I was going to be a good wife. Nobody, and I mean nobody, said a single word about what would happen after the last guest left. There was a bread pudding in the oven the whole afternoon before the ceremony, and I remember the smell of it, cinnamon and burnt sugar, and I remember thinking, in this weird quiet way, that I felt like the pudding, like something being prepared for someone else to eat. That's the kind of thought you don't say out loud. That's the kind of thought you push down and cover with prayer. I pushed it down. I covered it with prayer. And on the morning of the wedding, I put on the navy blue dress, and I told myself I was ready, because what else do you tell yourself? The bedroom in the Dawdi house was small, 10 feet by 12 maybe. There was one window facing east, and the curtain was white muslin, and the moon was full that night. I remember because I could see the shape of the ash tree branches through the fabric. There was a wedding quilt on the bed that grandmother Miriam had finished 6 days before. Double wedding ring pattern, blues and creams, one square in the corner where her stitches got looser because her hands were tired. There was a wash basin on the dresser with a chip on the rim. There was a lamp on the nightstand, and the wick needed trimming, and the light kept flickering, like it couldn't decide whether to stay. Samuel was standing by the door in his black wedding suit, and his face was the color of skim milk. He wouldn't look at me. He kept looking at the floorboards, at the wash basin, at his own hands. He was pulling at the seam of his left sleeve, over and over, the way you pull at a hangnail when you don't want to be where you are. I sat on the edge of the bed and I said, "Samuel," and my voice came out too small, and he flinched like I'd yelled. He said, I don't really know how," and he stopped. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't know how to finish the sentence. And I realized, sitting there with my hands folded in my lap like a little girl at church, that he was as scared as I was. Maybe more. He was 23 years old, and he had never been taught either. Nobody had drawn him a picture. Nobody had said a real word. He had a Bible verse, and a wife, and a locked door, and no map. He came and sat next to me on the quilt, and the mattress dipped, and our shoulders touched, and neither of us moved. I could hear his breathing. Short. Too short. His hand was shaking when he put it on top of mine, and I remember thinking his hand was cold, colder than mine, and I thought maybe I should say something to make him feel better, and then I thought, no. Wait. I thought, isn't he supposed to be making me feel better? But there was no script for either of us. So we sat there, and the lamp flickered, and outside, a horse in the barn stamped once and went still. He whispered, "The bishop said," and then he stopped again. He couldn't finish that one either. I wanted to pull my hand away and hold his tighter at the same time. What happened next? I'm going to tell you the way I remember it, which is in pieces, because that's how my body stored it. His hand moved. I stopped breathing. There was fumbling with fabric, and I didn't know what I was supposed to do with my own hands, so I just left them where they were, flat against the quilt, and I stared at the ceiling beam directly above the bed because it had a knot in the wood shaped almost like a heart. I remember pressing my tongue against the roof of my mouth so hard, I tasted something metallic. I remember him whispering, Is this right? And me whispering, I don't know, and neither of us stopping, because we thought stopping was the sin. That's what nobody tells you. In our world, stopping was the sin. Continuing was obedience. So we continued. And my body did something I didn't have a word for. It went somewhere else. It watched from the corner of the room, near the wash basin with the chipped rim, and it waited for the girl on the bed to be done. When it was over, he rolled onto his back and stared at the same ceiling beam and said, I'm sorry, very quietly. And I said, It's okay, even though I didn't know if it was, and he fell asleep with his hand still holding the edge of the quilt, like a child holds a blanket in a thunderstorm. I got up. I sat on the floor. I noticed the quilt had a loose thread trailing off the corner near my knee. I pulled it. I kept pulling. It came out longer than I thought it would, and I wound it around my finger until my fingertip turned purple, and then I unwound it, and I looked at the mark it left. That mark was the first thing after. That's what I remember. Neither of us understood that a body needs more than permission to be ready. Neither of us understood that what we'd just done, the way we'd done it, in that silence, with that fear, with that ignorance dressed up as holiness, was going to leave a mark on both of us that would take years to name. The bishop had told Samuel, in a 5-minute conversation the morning of the wedding, that a man should be gentle but firm, and that a woman's discomfort was natural and would pass. That was Samuel's education. 5 minutes. I later found out from a cousin who left the community that the bishop used the same 5 minutes on every groom. Word for word. Like a recipe. That is the fact I want you to sit with. 5 minutes. For the rest of 2 people's lives. He wasn't trying to hurt me. That's what makes it worse. He was doing exactly what he'd been told to do by the only men he trusted. And I was doing exactly what I'd been told to do by the only women I trusted. And none of them had been told anything either. Going back generations. Back to a time when nobody thought to ask if a girl on her wedding night had ever heard the word for what was about to happen to her. I didn't know the word arousal. I didn't know the word consent in the sense the outside world uses it. Not, did you agree to the marriage, but did your body agree to this moment? I didn't know a woman's body was built for pleasure too. Nobody said the word pleasure to me in connection with my own skin, until I was 27 years old. And when I heard it, I sat down on a kitchen floor in Lancaster, and I cried for an hour, because I understood, finally, what had been stolen. Not by Samuel, by the silence, by the recipe, by the half-verse. What formed in the months after was not a marriage exactly. It was a quiet arrangement. Twice a week, on Wednesday and Saturday nights, after the lamp went out, Samuel would reach for me, and I would turn toward him, and we would do the thing we'd been told to do, and we would not talk about it, and afterward I would lie on my side facing the wall and count the knots in the pine boards until my breathing slowed. There were 17 knots on my side of the wall. I knew them the way some women know their children's birthdays. I learned to leave my body before he touched me, not after, before. By the time his hand moved, I was already up near the ceiling beam with the heart-shaped knot, watching. I used to joke to myself, in that dry way you joke when there's nobody to tell, that at least the ceiling and I had a good marriage. That's the community's best-selling lie, by the way, that this is what all women feel, that we all leave, that it's normal to not be there. It was Anna Byler who almost cracked it open for me. We were at a quilting frolic the spring after my wedding, 6 women around a frame, in Ruth Miller's front room, and Anna was next to me threading a needle, and she said, real low, is it? And she stopped. I looked at her. She was 3 years married, and her eyes were tired in a way I recognized in my own reflection. I said, is it what, Anna? And she opened her mouth and closed it and opened it and said, never mind. It's fine. It's fine. And she went back to her stitching, and her hands were shaking, and I watched her hands shake for the next 4 hours, and I didn't say a word. That was the moment I knew, not from what she said, from what she couldn't. Every woman in that room was carrying the same thing, and every woman in that room had a folded dish towel, and a Bible verse, and 13 words from an older sister, and we were all pretending. There was one woman, Mary, she was maybe 30, married 10 years, 4 children, who did try to talk once, at a washing day at her mother's house. She said, out loud, in front of 3 of us, I don't think it's supposed to feel like nothing. Her mother-in-law was in the next room. Her mother-in-law came in with a basket of wet sheets, and set them down and said, Mary, the Lord gave us duties. Don't make yours a burden. That was it. That was the whole redirect. Mary looked at the floor, and nodded, and picked up a sheet, and started pinning it to the line, and I watched her pin that sheet with the same tired hands Anna had, and I understood the machine. The machine had a way of reaching in and pulling you back before you got too far out. Mary was pulled back that morning. I saw it happen in real time. By our 3rd year of marriage, I stopped asking women anything at all. I want to tell you about the moment I found the word. I was 27. I had left the community 2 years before. That's a whole other story. For another day. And I was working part-time at a public library in a town I won't name, shelving books in the health section on a Tuesday afternoon in October. I picked up a book to reshelve it. It fell open in my hands. There was a diagram on the page. A diagram of a woman's body, labeled, with arrows and words. And one of the words was a word I had never seen before. And next to that word was a sentence that said, in plain English, that this part of a woman's body existed for one purpose only, and that purpose was her own pleasure. I read that sentence 3 times. My knees actually gave out. I sat down between the shelves with the book open in my lap, and I made a sound I hadn't made since the floor of the Dawdi house. And what I felt, I want to be careful here, because people expect anger, and I did feel it later, but not in that first hour. In that first hour I felt grief. Just grief. A grief so specific it had edges. I grieved for the girl who sat on the floor in the navy blue dress. I grieved for Samuel, who fell asleep holding the quilt like a child, because he had never known either, and he would probably die not knowing, and his ignorance had cost him too. That's the thing nobody tells you. The silence doesn't just hurt the women. It hurts the men who were raised to think a 5-minute conversation with the bishop was enough. It hurts everyone. I sat on that library floor and I whispered, out loud, oh no, because I understood, all at once, that it could have been different. That was the worst part. Not that it had been bad, that it could have been good. I tried to tell a woman I worked with, a few weeks after. She was kind, English, had grown up in a normal house, in a normal town. I said, I didn't know my body could feel things until I was 27. And she looked at me the way people look at something they can't quite process, and she said, but, how? How did you not know? And I couldn't explain it to her. I tried. I said the words community, and bishop, and shame, and half verse, and she nodded and she was trying. She really was. But her face said what her mouth wouldn't. She couldn't get there. And I understood then that I was going to spend the rest of my life between 2 rooms. The room I came from that hurt me, and the room I walked into that couldn't quite see me. That's a specific kind of lonely nobody warned me about either. But you learn. Here is what I want to say about the community though, because it isn't only one thing. The community gave me 3 real gifts that I still carry, and I won't lie about them, because lying about them would be its own silence. The first is the sound of my grandmother Miriam humming a hymn while she rolled out pie dough in her kitchen on a Friday afternoon. Flour on her forearms up to the elbows, and the low sun coming through the window turning everything gold. I have never in my life felt safer than in that kitchen. The second is bread from a wood-fired oven, the crust so dark it's almost black, and the way my mother would break it open with her thumbs and steam would rise, and she would hand me the first piece without saying anything, because in our house love was a piece of bread nobody had to ask for. The third is the sound of horses at dawn. The soft stamp of a hoof in fresh straw, the puff of breath in cold air, the way the barn smells like hay and leather, and something older than any of us. I am homesick for a place that hurt me. Both of those things are true at the same time. And here is what I know now, at 34, that I couldn't have said at 19. It was silence, dressed up as holiness. That's the whole sentence. That's the whole harm. Not the theology, not the plain dresses, not the horses, or the hymns, or the bread. The silence. The choice to withhold from a girl the knowledge of her own body, and call that withholding godly. Beauty and harm can live in the same house. They lived in mine. They live in me, still. I am not building a life that rejects everything I came from. I'm building a life that keeps the bread and the hymns and the horses, and puts words to the things nobody would name. My daughter is 4 years old. She already knows the real words for her body. She says them out loud at the dinner table sometimes, and I don't flinch. I let her. That is the choosing. That is the whole thing. If you grew up somewhere your own body was kept from you like something dangerous, if you were handed a wedding night and no words to hold it with, if you learned to leave your body before anyone touched it, and thought that was just what being a woman meant, I see you. You survived something, and surviving is enough. You are not broken. You were never broken. You were a girl in a room with a lamp that flickered and a Bible verse cut in half, and you did the only thing you knew how to do, and you're still here. That is not a small thing. That is the whole thing. And to the woman who's still inside the community and can't say any of this out loud, I see you. And I'm not asking you to leave. I'm just telling you the words exist. To the woman who left and can't explain it to anyone on the outside, I see you. And the loneliness is real. And it does get quieter. To the woman thinking about leaving, I see you. And there's no rush. And there's no wrong way. To the woman who's been married 20 years and just now recognized herself in this story, I see you. And it's not too late. To the woman who felt something crack open 3 minutes ago and doesn't know what to do with it, I see you. And you can put the phone down and sit with it, and it will still be true tomorrow. Wherever you are in this, I see you, and you are not alone. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you felt listening to this. If there was one moment, one sentence, one detail that landed in your chest, tell me which one. I read every one of them. There is so much more I haven't said yet. I'm just getting started. There are stories I haven't been brave enough to tell. About the years between the wedding and the leaving, about my mother, about the day I packed a bag. But I'm getting closer. If you want to walk with me while I get there, this is Rebecca Amish Home, and the door is open. And to the members and Super Chat family, you're the reason the next story gets told. If you want to be part of that, the door is always open. Your body was always yours. Nobody had the right to teach you otherwise.